Okay, we're gonna do some status checks here right quick, y'all, and see if we have audio. Just wait one and give me a status check. Are you hearing me okay? It sounds like you can hear me okay. I'm Das. I'm up in the NSF studios right now with NASASpaceflight.com. We're standing by for Chris G, who's down at the Cape for the Starlink launch that's coming up. You can tell this is super official because I've got a SpaceX shirt on and everything. But what we are going to do now is see if we can't switch over to the Cape and make contact with Chris G, who has been setting up the camera so we can get that live feed of the Starlink launch. This is the Flight 2 of Starlink version 1.0 happening down at Cape Canaveral today. Let's check in on Chris and see what we got.
Just in case. I mean, it's like, oh, confused. I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, oops, oh, it's a new capsule, the Gator. Instead of a dragon.
It's over there on that. And good evening, afternoon, morning, or night, wherever you are around the world, and welcome to what is still the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station here in Florida, where you are looking live at the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket as it is perched on Slick 40 here. It is a gorgeously, gorgeously crystal clear night. There is not a cloud in the sky. You can right over us see the 3/4 full moon, the Orion constellation with the very, very dim Betelgeuse, and all the nice winter constellations in the northern hemisphere. An absolutely gorgeous night where we are about 54 minutes away from the scheduled launch of the Falcon 9 with 60 new Starlink satellites for the space-based internet constellation. Right now, SpaceX is targeting the dead center of a 20-minute launch window. That window opens at 9:09 p.m. Eastern Time and closes at 9:29 Eastern, and SpaceX is targeting 9:19 on the dot for liftoff today. They are targeting the dead center of that window primarily to increase and maximize the performance and efficiency of the Falcon 9 in delivering those satellites directly in plane for where they are going today. Under a minute to go and no word yet of any issues. They have passed the technical readiness poll at this point and are proceeding down into their final preparations before fueling the rocket, which will begin at the T-minus 35-minute mark. For those of you intimately familiar with the Falcon 9, and for those of you who are new, the Falcon 9 uses a fueling process that is known as load and go. So that T-minus 35-minute mark when they begin fueling, that is 35 minutes before liftoff. So also the L minus time, a launch minus meaning L. So they do not hold, they load it and they go. But here tonight they will have about 10 minutes of hold ability after they start fueling, if they should encounter some kind of a technical issue, or if the range should encounter some kind of issue that would prevent them from launching at 9:19. They do have until 9:27 or 9:29 this evening. If you have any questions, hello to all of you around the world. If you have any questions, please go ahead and throw them up in the chat of this live stream, whether it's a question about Starlink or the Falcon 9 or Crew Dragon or in-flight abort or SpaceX or the commercial crew program or anything to do with spaceflight. Go ahead and throw that question up into chat. Our producer Das will go ahead and send them over to me so that we can get them answered for you. We love the interactive nature of these live streams and bringing you close to the launches, but also answering all of the questions that you have. So even if you think the question might be repetitive or asked on a previous stream, or you're nervous about asking, please go ahead and ask. We are here to answer your questions. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the mission that we will be witnessing here tonight. So when the Falcon 9 lifts off here, scheduled for 9:19 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 2:19 UTC, once Falcon 9 lifts off, it will perform a 8-minute 49-second burn to get into its initial orbit, and then it will coast for about 36.5 minutes before performing a 2-second burn of its Merlin vac engine 45 minutes and 10 seconds into flight. There'll then be another approximate 16-minute coast phase, at which point 1 hour, 1 minute after liftoff, the Starlinks will all separate at the same time using the tumble feature, where they all separate and sort of like fan out like a deck of cards. So overall, a 61-minute launch sequence today from liftoff to payload separation and deployment. Now, the payload fairings will attempt to recover the payload fairings. One half of the payload fairing they will attempt to recover on Gomistry, which is located 730 kilometers northeast of the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, off the coast of about 250 kilometers off the coast of North Carolina. Gomistry will attempt to catch one of the payload fairing halves. The other will splash down under parafoil or parachute into the Atlantic for recovery. The reason that both of the fairing catching ships are not out at sea is because Gomischief is here in Port Canaveral undergoing its arm netting, the arms that hold its nets. It's undergoing some repairs here in Port Canaveral and was not ready for this particular mission. The first stage, which has been used 3 times to date, it was used back in September of 2018 for the Telstar Vantage 18 mission, and then hauled across the country to Vandenberg Air Force Base, where it was used for the Iridium 8, the final, or the Iridium 8 mission. And then it was hauled back here to Cape Canaveral, where it launched the first Starlink mission back in May. And now it is here being used for the 4th time for the second operational Starlink mission. This means that this particular booster with this mission will be the booster that has launched the most number of satellites ever, at 131 satellites launched by this first stage of the Falcon 9. That is absolutely incredible. 120 Starlinks, 10 Iridium constellation satellites, and 1 Telstar 18 Vantage satellite. If you've got questions about, but they will attempt to recover this booster for use a 5th time. This booster will attempt a landing on the autonomous spaceport drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, which is stationed about 630 kilometers northeast of Cape Canaveral, about 250 miles off the coast of South Carolina. So Gomistry, 250 kilometers off North Carolina, 730 kilometers northeast of the Cape, and the drone ship is 250 kilometers off the coast of South Carolina, located 630 kilometers northeast of the launch site. And if you will give me 1 second here, we are getting some of your questions. If you do have any questions about tonight's mission, about the Falcon 9 in general, about SpaceX in general, about the upcoming in-flight abort test here on January 18th. For those of you that missed the tweet, it was made official just a few minutes ago from the Commercial Crew Program that the in-flight abort of Dragon is now January 18th. That is a Saturday at 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, or 1300 hours UTC. But if you have any questions about that in general or spaceflight in general, go ahead and throw them up in the chat for this live stream on YouTube where you're watching it, and our producer will get it over to me. If you will give me 1 quick moment to walk away here, I'm going to pull up the countdown nets and audio so I can listen to launch control for you guys and provide updates throughout tonight's mission. But an important thing for our live stream today is you will be able to see the entirety of the launch here on our stream with us. When we physically lose sight of the rocket from the camera you are watching the view of right now, we will switch to the official SpaceX stream, so you don't need to go anywhere, you don't need to switch back and forth. We'll bring you live coverage all the way through the initial orbit insertion, roughly 9 minutes after liftoff. So give me 1 quick moment to walk away and pull up those nets, and I'll be back. Das, if you want to take it away, I'll ping you on WhatsApp when I'm ready to take back over.
All right. Wasn't quite ready for that one. Let me know if you can hear me again. All right. Wasn't quite ready for that one.
Yeah,
Let me
all
know
right,
if you
good.
can hear me again.
All right.
And it's going to echo, so I'll take that down. We're bumping a bunch of stuff around right now. And it's going to echo, so I'll take that down. We're bumping a bunch of stuff. How many times is this going to echo? Stop echoing. I had one too many echoes, one too many audio feeds in there. Again, behind me here, we've got a live feed. This is down from Cape Canaveral. You see Space Launch Complex 40. Right now, you can tell because there's 4 lightning catenaries, the towers in the background. Chris taking a bit of a break for just a second. Okay, and y'all can hear that. I'm juggling lots of stuff. I'm running 4 streams right now. I'm running Chris's camera coming up to here. I'm running my camera going over to a cloud compositor. We're sending that over to YouTube. YouTube is sending that to you. And then I'm also streaming this on my Twitch channel right now. And it's like behind the scenes, I'm like, when Chris is over there talking, I am telling people how I'm actually making all this happen behind the scenes. So if you're interested in learning how we make this work, that's what I'm doing, the hidden behind the scenes commentary. But we are standing by for this. And let me make sure I can see here whenever Chris is back. Again, I am Das. I'm in the NASA Spaceflight studio here. If you have questions, put them into either of these chats, honestly. Put them into the YouTube chat, or you can put them into my Twitch chat if you're watching from Twitch, and I will pass those on to Chris so he can answer them. In fact, Chris is telling me now that he's ready to take it back, so let's switch back over to Chris and see what he has going on out at the Cape.
All right, and we are back. And we are back here, and we have some questions that we're going to take. If you've got any other questions, keep throwing them up in chat, even if you think that these questions may have been asked before or anything like that. Please, please, please go ahead and ask. We're here to answer your questions and bring you through tonight's launch. It doesn't have to just be about Starlink either. It can be about anything to do with SpaceX or space in general. But our first question is, how far is the camera from the rocket currently? Where are you located? So both the rocket and our camera and myself are located on the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. We are 3 miles or 5 kilometers from the launch pad. We are due south of the launch pad, actually. So primarily what you are seeing in the frame is actually the back of the transporter erector. And the only part of the rocket you can see is the very tippity top. If you go up the tower, close to the top there, the tower in the center, you see a sort of bulbous, white, rounded thing up at the top, and that's the payload fairing, underneath of which are the 60 Starlink satellites being launched tonight. And that's actually the only part of the rocket that you can see before it lifts off from this particular vantage point. But we are on, specifically, we are on what is known as the ITL Causeway, and yeah, about 3 miles or 5 kilometers from Slick 40 tonight. From our vantage point, if you go directly to the left of the view that you have now, I'm looking at the vehicle assembly building, and then I can come across and I can see pad 39A, the Atlas pad at 41, the SpaceX pad we're looking at 40, and then off to the right-hand side of the screen is the Delta 4 pad, or Slick 37B. Here at the Cape, and then the Blue Origin pad that they are building is pretty far away. They don't have lights on it right now. I don't have a great visual on it, but it's here. You can definitely see its water tower. It no longer looks like a weird Martian. It actually looks like a water tower now, so they are definitely making progress on that pad as well. Another question that we have here is, how does the Falcon 9 reignite for boost back in 0G? That is an absolutely excellent question. So we are primarily used to here on the ground, right, that we use gravity, right, to pull the propellants down into the engines as the turbines ignite, and that just sucks everything back down. But when you're in 0G, how do you get that same reaction? And it's a mixture between the pressurization of the propellant tanks and the cold gas thrusters that you see the Falcon 9 firing as it flips around. Those thrusters impart a little bit of force and acceleration onto the booster, which pushes the propellant down to the bottom of those tanks, and with the pressurization therein, allows the engines to start in 0 gravity, just like they do here on the ground with Earth's sea level gravity. So that is an absolutely excellent question, and that's exactly the same thing that's used on the second stage when it ignites after stage separation and when it reignites later today for its 2-second orbital circularization burn. So that's another part of the launch sequence today is after the 8-minute 49-second ride to its initial orbit, the Falcon 9 will then coast until 45 minutes 10 seconds after liftoff, at which point it will reignite its Merlin vac engine on the second stage for just a quick 2-second burn that will circularize the orbit at 290 kilometers and prepare the vehicle for Starlink separation about 16 minutes after that. So another question here, what all exactly is used to determine the launch window? Which is an excellent question. So it might seem a little odd that we have a 20-minute launch window in the middle of the night for 60 Starlink satellites that aren't rendezvousing with anything, right? We're very used to when there are International Space Station missions with the Dragon, right, that because Dragon is trying to catch the International Space Station, you have a single second to get off the ground when the ground track of the station passes close to the launch site. And that's actually the same thing that's being used here, only Starlinks aren't actually rendezvousing with anything, but they have to launch into a very specific plane. Just like the space station orbits in its orbital plane, the Starlinks have their planes as well. And in order to build out the constellation with global coverage, you identify multiple different planes that you want these satellites to operate within, and then you pick the planes you want to launch into first. So that's what they have done here today. And it just so happens that the plane that they, or orbital corridor, if you will, another term for the same thing, this particular orbital corridor that they are launching into today intersects the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station at 9:19 p.m. Eastern Time, or 2:19 a.m. UTC time. And that gives us our launch window. So it's great to think about these things as the same way we do with space station rendezvous windows, where they're trying to launch into a specific corridor. They're not rendezvousing with anything, but it ends up working exactly the same. So that is how the launch window for today was calculated. If that wasn't exactly what you were asking with that question, go ahead and put a follow-up in the chat, so I can make sure that I answered that properly and with what you were looking for. But just for today, that's how they're doing it. Do we know how many Starlink sats have the new anti-reflective coating? That's an excellent question. From what we know, there's one. There's one that has the new anti-reflective coating to lower its brightness or albedo. A huge part of, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, there have been some interesting articles out there that have relayed the concerns of the astronomical community about the potential effect that Starlink satellites have on ground-based astronomy, particularly when they are just launched, freshly launched, and still raising themselves up into their 350-kilometer checkout orbit. The Starlinks are dropped off, all of them in a 290-kilometer circular orbit, where they deploy their single solar array, and then they fire their Hal thrusters to start spreading out from one another, and gradually they're all raised up from 290 kilometers to 350 kilometers, where they undergo extensive checkouts prior to being raised into their orbital altitude, their operational altitude. And when they're in that first raising maneuver up to 350 kilometers, they're oriented in a way that minimizes drag with Earth's atmosphere. And consequently, what that means is that their brightest or most reflective side is actually angled down at Earth. So they are very, very bright for the small objects that they are. And this has created some concern within the astronomical community about how that might affect ground-based observations. So one of two things that SpaceX is starting with this particular mission is testing a new low reflective paint job, basically, on one of the Starlinks to see how well that works. They are also going to, starting tomorrow, provide astronomy groups and the world's observatories with what are known as the predictive two-line elements. And these are the calculated daily or twice daily orbital calculations of everything that is up there in orbit of Earth. And what this will do for the Starlink satellites and what SpaceX will push out to the astronomical community are just those 2-line element tracking data so that the observatories know, hey, heads up, this is when the Starlinks are going to be coming within a visible pass of your observatory, so astronomers using your observatory plan accordingly. So those are 2 of the mitigating factors that they are introducing with this particular Starlink mission. But we do believe that there's only one that has that reflective coating on it, or that new anti-reflective coating on it. Another question we have, and these are great questions. Keep them coming, guys. I've got about 7 more here that my producer Das is sending me. So keep them coming, even if you think it's already been, answered. So next question we have: is this officially the first 2020 launch globally? Yes, it is. SpaceX is kicking off the 2020 year about 13 hours before China launches a Long March 3BE rocket with a classified military payload from the Xichang Satellite Launch Center in the People's Republic of China. But this is the first launch globally of the year, and China will follow very quickly in about 13 hours. If they haven't changed that, it's been a few hours since I've looked at that, so they may have changed by now. But we have a great app called NASASpaceflight, designed by our Michael Baylor. So go over there and check it out for that up-to-date launch archive. But this is the first one globally for 2020. So depending on what side of the debate you fall on, this is either the first launch of a new decade or the first launch of the last year of the decade. But we'll let that argument play out in chat now that I've started it. Another good question that we have here: how far up the East Coast will this be visible? This will be visible for significant portions of the eastern seaboard of the United States, as well as to the northern Bahamas as well. The Falcon 9 is launching northeast into a 53-degree inclination orbit, so slightly more northern than launches to the International Space Station. So this should be incredibly visible. I know here in Florida, to give you guys a sense of what we can see here, we will not only see the entire first stage mission and ignition of the second stage, we will also, from here on the ground at Cape Canaveral, very clearly see the entry burn of the Falcon 9 as it is off the coast of South Carolina headed for the drone ship. So anywhere from Florida to the Carolinas, definitely be looking if your skies are clear, and especially if you are in the Carolinas, look for that entry burn. It's probably too far out to see the landing burn, but definitely look for that entry burn about 6.5 minutes after liftoff here tonight. And I believe if you want to head on over to Flight Club, that's Flight, F-L-I-G-H-T, Flight Club. I know I saw very briefly today that Declan had a visibility map for the eastern seaboard of the United States. So that should give you a much better indication of where and when it might be visible in your particular area. All right. Do we know how many back at Hawthorne in Mission Control in Los Angeles, and the Starlink teams also watching this mission, watching the things that they built go into space to start serving their duty. So hundreds of people working this launch tonight from across the United States. So if you are just joining us, I'm going to take a quick break in answering some of the questions here, but if you do have more questions, keep them coming. Even if you think they've been answered already, go ahead and throw them up in chat and we'll get them answered for you. If you are just joining us, I'm Chris Gebhardt. I'm the Assistant Managing Editor of NASASpaceflight, and we are about 3 miles or 5 kilometers away from Launch Pad 40 here at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And before anyone corrects me, it is still the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. The U.S. did have its creation of a 6th military branch called the Space Force. This is technically the first launch happening under the Space Force's authority, but Cape Canaveral Air Force Station has not changed its name. So still Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And we are doing good. Here, everything still appears to be on track for a liftoff at 9:19 Eastern Time, or 2:19 UTC. We should be getting some indications here about our fueling pole and how everything is progressing on that end. The Falcon 9 countdown nets are very, very quiet normally. So quiet is good for the Falcon 9. So sometimes there just aren't a lot of things to update you on. Quick check on my phone would also help if I had turned the speakerphone on. So we'll deal with that. But we generally like very quiet countdowns for the Falcon 9 and not a lot of chatter on the net. So quiet is very good. So there might not be a lot to update you on from the nets, but when there is, we will. So yes, so we are standing by for the Starlink launch. It will take about an hour and 1 hour and 1 minute from liftoff to the point where the Starlinks separate. And if you are joining us, you do not need to go anywhere to witness the launch phase for this mission. We will bring the launch to you live with the camera that you're looking through right now. And when we lose it with the ground-based camera, this stream will switch to include the SpaceX stream. So you don't need to go anywhere. Or switch back and forth between the streams for the launch phase of this particular mission. So let's get back to your questions, and if you do have any questions here, go ahead and put them in the chat of this YouTube stream, and we will go ahead and get them answered for you. So, but one thing that I really do want to show you real quick, because it is absolutely gorgeous how this looks tonight, is Falcon 9's reflection on the water. Absolutely gorgeous. It is very, very calm here in the lagoon area of the Cape. It's normally like very, very choppy. So the fact that we have a glassy water conditions here, providing some awesome reflections for the Falcon 9 as it heads into so about 29 minutes away from our liftoff here. So we heard nothing over the net, so they should be fueling at this point. The Falcon 9 fuels under what's known as the load and go procedure, meaning that all of the propellant, the RP1 kerosene and densified liquid oxygen, is all pumped into the vehicle within roughly 32 minutes, because fueling wraps up about 3 minutes before liftoff. So very, very, very rapid and quick fueling process here for the vehicle. We also, and before I get back to taking your questions, I just wanted to very quickly check and make sure that I had everything for you. Yes, and there's no updates on the SpaceX Twitter account. So fueling should be underway with densified liquid oxygen and RP1 kerosene, both flowing right now into the first stage, and RP1 kerosene only flowing into the second stage for right now. They load the kerosene and oxygen together simultaneously into the first stage, and on the second stage they load the kerosene first, stop, and then load the liquid oxygen. So let us get back to your questions here. So why are there flashing lights on the lightning protection masts? So that is U.S. federal law, that whenever you build a gigantic tower into the sky, you have to put warning lights on them and situational awareness lights on them for general aviation. So yes, the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and the Kennedy Space Center are secured facilities, but they are not no-fly zones most of the time. You can, as a private pilot, request permission to fly over the Cape. So just like the rest of the buildings and towers around the country would have to have those, so do the lightning protection towers at Slick 40, which is what you're seeing blinking there, both red and white. So a question about the payload fairings is, yes, indeed, they will be attempting to catch the fairings. One half of the payload fairing will attempt to be caught in the net by Go Mystery, which is located 730 kilometers northeast of the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station off the coast of North Carolina. The second fairing catcher ship, however, was damaged and is still being repaired here in Port Canaveral, so the other payload fairing half will simply parachute down into the Atlantic for recovery and potential reuse after that. Another question that we have here is, why doesn't SpaceX use the Falcon Heavy in order to increase the satellites they can deploy to orbit? An excellent question. It actually has nothing to do with the mass of the Starlink satellites. It has to do with how many they can cram inside the payload fairing, and 60 is about it. They could go a little bit more than that, but 60 is about as much as the payload fairing can accommodate, and the payload fairing on the Falcon 9 and the Falcon Heavy are identical. So you don't need the Falcon Heavy in this case, because it doesn't come down to payload mass. It literally comes down to how many of the satellites you can cram inside the payload fairing. And for that, a reusable Falcon 9 is perfect for the job. So that is why they do not use the Falcon Heavy for this. And big thanks to Jared for the $10 donation to us there. Thank you so much. And to Noon as well for $25 in Super Chat. Thank you so much for supporting what we do here. It means a lot to us. It's our passion to bring you guys this stuff, and we're very happy that you find it worthy, and that you keep coming back to us. So thank you to Jared and to Noon. Another question that we have here, is the non-reflective paint on the satellite, or is it on the solar panel also? It is on the satellite. The solar panel is just the solar panel and the solar arrays. So no non-reflective coating on that, or that would pretty much eliminate the whole reason for having the solar panel, which is to not reflect but capture that light energy that comes in from the sun. So not on the solar array, but just on the satellite itself. Another question is, can you see the strong back from here? Yes, in fact, let me zoom back in just a little bit. That's a good question. Actually, 90% of what you are looking at there is the strong back. We are actually due south of the launch pad, so we are primarily looking at the strong back, and the only thing that you can actually see of the Falcon 9 is the tip of the payload fairing there. We will not be able to see it like pull back before liftoff, when it goes from fully vertical to the 88.5 degree initial retract prior to liftoff, but you will be able to see it throw back to its 45 degree position as the Falcon 9 lifts off, and you'll have a beautifully clear view of the Falcon 9 from here as the strong back falls away from it toward us. But yeah, you totally can see the strong back, because that's pretty much all you're looking at from this particular vantage point on the ITL causeway at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Another question that we have here, are there any upgrades on these satellites compared to the previous Starlink flight? So SpaceX is always iterating. I think we can say with some fair degree of certainty that there are some tweaks that are always made in the production process. Nothing to throw it into a different version of a Starlink, but just things they continually see on orbit that they can tweak on the next batch before they're launched. But of course, the biggest upgrade is actually the less reflective paint on one of those satellites to help reduce that satellite's reflectivity, to dim them down when they're in their initial orbit and as they're raising up to their checkout orbit, just to keep them as dim as possible, to try to mitigate any interference that they might have with ground-based astronomy and ground-based telescopes. So that is the biggest change today. There is a slight procedural change to how they are being deployed into orbit. This batch of 60 is being deployed into a 290-kilometer circular orbit. The first batch of 60 operational satellites that were launched back in November were deployed 10 kilometers lower at 280 kilometers. So there's that slight procedural change, and it should be noted too that even though the press kit for this particular mission did not mention that the satellites would be raised to an intermediary 350 kilometer checkout orbit, they still are. They just wanted to highlight in the press kit the new procedures that were taking place for this particular mission, but they are still being deployed at 290 kilometers, and then raising up to 350 kilometers for their 1 to 4 month checkout phase. Another question that we have here, can you describe the launch path for this mission? Is it going east or where's it going? Yeah, so it is going northeast. It is going into a 33-degree inclination orbit, so it will parallel the U.S. East Coast from Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, up past Virginia and New York, and the New England states and the Canadian Maritime provinces. So it will actually be slightly more to the north. Space station. So if you are along the eastern seaboard of the United States, specifically the southern states, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, you have a very good chance of seeing this mission during its launch phase, and even farther north, because the Falcon 9 will be quite high as it ascends. So even the DC area, Maryland, getting up into the New York area, you have a good shot of seeing at least a very fast-moving star there, and we are seeing venting from the Falcon 9. That is our T-minus 20-minute vent right on time at 20:59 Eastern, or 1:59 UTC. So right on time as we head toward the 9:19 Eastern, 2:19 scheduled liftoff of the Falcon 9. So again, if you are just joining us, I'm Chris Gebhardt, the Assistant Managing Editor of NASA Spaceflight. You are looking live at a very happy, healthy, and venting Falcon 9 on Slick 40 here at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Apologies to those of you who have been with us from the beginning, but I want to go over it again for anyone who's just joined us, that it is still the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Even though this is the first mission under the newly created Space Force, the Space Force is part of the Air Force. And the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station has not changed its name at this time, and there is no confirmation that the name will change or that it won't change. So it is still the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and we will refer to it as such. What you are seeing is the gaseous oxygen venting out of the first stage of the Falcon 9. So as they load that densified liquid oxygen into the Falcon 9, it begins to boil off very quickly, and they have to vent that out to make room for additional propellant that they need for the actual launch phase. So that's what we're seeing. It's exactly what we want to be seeing at this point in the countdown. That actually answers one of the questions we just got about why does it vent. They vent out the unneeded gaseous oxygen to make room for the pressurization and for the for the rest of the liquid oxygen that needs to be loaded into the stage at this point. So right now in our countdown, the first stage is being loaded simultaneously with both RP1 kerosene and liquid oxygen. The first stage is still only loading liquid kerosene at this moment. RP1 kerosene, they will be closing that out here within the next minute and a half to prepare for the start of liquid oxygen loading into the second stage. So the first stage gets its propellants loaded together. The first stage, they load all the kerosene first, stop, and then load the liquid oxygen. So that's just the way they've discovered is the most efficient and safe way to load the Falcon 9 under its rapid load and go procedure. I like this question. Can we time warp till the launch like in Kerbal Space? Oh, I wish, but sometimes waiting is fun. Also, you know, I'm a talker. My teachers in kindergarten through 5th grade would have, they had those like twice a year parent-teacher conferences, and at all of them from kindergarten to 5th grade, I was always told that I needed to A, learn to use my inside voice, and to B, learn that I was not the teacher. I listened to neither of those. And here we are. Now you're listening to my wonderful voice take you through the launch. So there we have it. So another question that we have, is the Falcon 9 locked in the block iteration? Due to the crew contract. Oh, okay. So you're okay. So this question is asking about the design of the Falcon 9. Basically, can SpaceX still make alterations or tweaks or changes to the rocket, or is the design completely locked because of NASA's commercial crew program? SpaceX always likes to fix things, and rocket companies in general like to fix things that they notice on various flights. Right? Sometimes things work exactly as we plan them to. Sometimes there are little snafus and snags along the way that the general public never hears about and never knows about because they're minor and they didn't impact the safety or success of the mission. But nonetheless are things that when they're seen make the engineers want to say, okay, it's not that it's bad, but we can fix that and make that more efficient. So definitely certain parts of the design are quote unquote locked from a NASA perspective, in that they can be changed if there's a reason for them to be changed. But that's that. I'm sorry, the music just stopped here and I realized how loud I was talking. But anyway, well there, and now we're back to that whole kindergarten through 5th grade teacher telling me to use my inside voice, but I'm outside, so we're gonna continue. So the design iterations, like, it's kind of a yes or no question in that they can definitely fix things if they see things that they want to fix. They obviously have to talk to NASA about that because the Falcon 9 is a crew-rated transport vehicle for Crew Dragon. And crews up to the International Space Station. But that all comes with a partnership with the commercial crew program. You know, the same way that United Launch Alliance would fix something or tweak something on the Atlas V, if they saw something that was not a cause for concern or a cause for alarm, but something that once it presents itself, you want to fix it. And that holds true to all rocket companies. So no radical design changes, certainly. Those are all happening over on the Starship side of SpaceX operations, but the Falcon 9 can be tweaked if needed. And a good question here, any astronauts on this flight? Not on this one. This is a completely uncrewed mission of just 60 Starlink satellites. That's part of SpaceX's space-based internet constellation. Later this month, on January 18th, as confirmed by the commercial crew program earlier this evening, will be the in-flight abort test that had previously been scheduled for January 11th, but it has been pushed back a week to January 18th. That will take place from Launch Complex 39A. It too will be uncrewed, but it will use a Dragon capsule that is crew-rated, and it will test the ability of the capsule to abort safely away from the Falcon 9 right around the moment of maximum aerodynamic pressure, or max Q. That's a very critical test for the commercial crew program coming up on the 18th, and that is the last major milestone for SpaceX before NASA clears them to put 2 crew members, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, onto the Crew Dragon capsule and launch them to the International Space Station on the Demo 2 mission. We do not have a date for that yet. Elon has said that the hardware should be ready in the first quarter of this year, so sometime in February or March, but that NASA reviews would likely push that out a couple of months. But that's the latest that we have, so no firm date on when NASA and SpaceX would be targeting that first crewed mission of Dragon. But tonight is all uncrewed, and all about our 60 little Starlink satellites that will soon spread their wings and join the constellation to bring us internet from space. So quick check of our clock, we are about 12.5 minutes away from liftoff here at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. So the countdown net should get pretty chatty here in the business end of the countdown, which is good. But until then, if you've got any more questions, keep coming. Keep them coming. Even if you think they've already been asked, throw them up in chat. We'll get it answered for you. We love the interactive nature of these live streams, and that's what we're here for. Do we know the total mass of these Starlink satellites? So the mass is unchanged from last time. I do not know it off the top of my head, um, but it ties the last SpaceX mission for the heaviest payload that the Falcon 9 has launched to date. I'm sure someone at NSF can look at a past article, and I believe it's in Ian's or Thomas's article from back in November of what the mass is, the total launch mass for this. So I'm sure we can get that for you. And DOS, if someone can shoot it to DOS or post it up in the chat, and DOS can send it to me, we can answer it on air for you. What is the life expectancy of the satellites? That's an excellent question, and I don't think SpaceX has really said what they believe the life expectancy is. I know they do plan to periodically refresh the constellation. I think about 3 to 5 years is what I read for the life expectancy of the Starlinks. Some of those could obviously greatly exceed that. Some of them could underperform that number, and that's a lot of the reason why the constant refresh of the constellation is planned as they build it out. Here we go. So each satellite weighs 260 kilograms. So let's pull up the phone calculator. 260 times 60. So total launch mass is 15,600 kilograms. Today for the 60 Starlink satellites on board. So there is your answer to that for what our payload mass is for today, right around 15,600 kilograms. So a very heavy payload, but well within the Falcon 9's performance capability, even for reuse, as this stage will land on the autonomous spaceport drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. How far north will the final Starlink coverage reach Sweden? The goal of this constellation is to provide global coverage. So yes, every populated area on Earth will be covered by the Starlink satellites, including the poles. So from Sweden to Africa, from Australia to northern Siberia, to the tippity tip of South America, up to Alaska, should have global coverage from this constellation. Is this a drone ship landing? Yes, it is a drone ship landing. The Starlinks are too heavy to support a return to launch site landing of the Falcon 9 first stage. So the booster will land on the Of Course I Still Love You drone ship, which will be positioned, or is positioned, about 630 kilometers northeast of the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and about 250 kilometers off the coast of South Carolina. So we are about 8.5 minutes away from liftoff. How many satellites will be in the final constellation? That is an excellent question. We don't know. We know that SpaceX has filed a license with the FCC for up to 42,000 Starlinks. Take that for what it is. I don't think that's the goal that they're trying to get to in terms of the overall complete constellation. I believe that's much farther down to about 12,000 to 13,000. But SpaceX is constantly refining that plan as they look at what the most efficient way is to achieve global coverage and reliable global coverage and meet the demand that comes with that. So we don't know what the final number will be. We just know what they've filed for in terms of the maximum number they've filed to launch. Has SpaceX released a visibility chart? Can we see it from North Carolina? You will be able to see it from North Carolina, from the coastal areas of North Carolina, if it is visible. I'm sorry, if your skies are clear. I do not believe SpaceX has released a visibility map, but I know Declan over at Flight Club, if you look at Flight Club on Twitter, did release a visibility prediction map for tonight's liftoff. How soon can we buy Starlink service? They hope that initial offerings in some of the northern latitudes of the US and Canada will be available later this year, but a more large-scale rollout in 2021 and 2022. Do we know how much the fuel for the Falcon 9 launch? If you ask that question about the fuel, can you throw up in chat what you mean by that? Do you mean how much fuel is on board or how much the fuel costs. Because the fuel is a very small fraction of the overall cost of the rocket and the launch. Yeah, so the cost, Das is correcting me, our producer is telling me that question was about the cost of the fuel. The fuel is very minuscule. I believe it's something around $300,000 for a multi-million-dollar rocket. So it's really change when you compare the two figures. It is by far not the long pole item in terms of cost for these particular rockets. All right, so we are, looks like we are about 6 minutes away from liftoff here. So let me go ahead and start getting everything ready for liftoff here and to be able to track that. So, and to the person who was asking earlier about how many satellites had the new paint scheme on board, it is just one. SpaceX did just confirm it's only the one satellite that has that function or has that paint job on it. All right, so we are we're about 4.5 minutes now away from liftoff. If you do have any questions, continue to put them up in chat. We might not get to them before liftoff, but we can answer them afterward. And remember too, you don't have to go anywhere. We will switch when we lose visual sight of it here in Florida. We will switch over to the SpaceX stream to provide you seamless coverage of tonight's launch of the second batch of 60 operational Starlink satellites. It is though very important to point out that with a successful launch tonight, SpaceX will become the largest satellite operator in the world in terms of number of active satellites. They will have approximately 180 active satellites in orbit after a successful launch tonight, and that will surpass Planet Labs, which has about 150 active satellites in orbit. So a big night for SpaceX, not just for a successful launch and the continuation of the deployment of the Starlinks, but also that they will become the largest satellite operator in terms of active satellites in the world. So we are now about 3.5 minutes away from liftoff. And the Falcon 9, like most rockets, is completely automated. So everything that we are seeing in this countdown from the T-minus 35-minute mark when they began fueling through payload separation in an hour and 1 minute after liftoff, every part of this process is automated. All automated. And we can actually hear, it's so cool, we can actually hear the Falcon 9 performing some of its final vents. And everything. This should be an awesome launch. If you are in Florida, definitely go outside and watch this. Crystal clear skies. This should be awesome. So let's go ahead and listen in to the final few minutes of the countdown as they finish, as they close out the fueling process and they prepare for liftoff today. They've closed out the liquid oxygen load at this point. Everything is proceeding down toward liftoff. Under 2 minutes now to launch. right, and liquid oxygen load on the second stage is closed out, and the vehicle is on internal power. There's another good vent of gaseous oxygen, normal for this point in the countdown. Again, getting the last of that boiled off gaseous oxygen out of the Falcon 9 before it lifts off. Again, if you're just joining us, this is the first of 24 planned Starlink launches this year, the first of over 30 SpaceX launches this year, and the first global launch of 2020. Also, it is the first of an expected 48 launches from Florida and the Eastern Range here at Cape Canaveral in the Kennedy Space Center this year. So a very, very busy 2020 in store for us. Under 1 minute to go, Falcon 9 is in startup. We are go for launch.
Seconds.
30 seconds to go.
T-minus 15 seconds.
15 seconds.
10,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition, liftoff.
liftoff. Go Starlink, go Falcon, Space Force, inaugural launch.
Look at that. Max Q, and look at that contrail. They are chilling down the Merlin vac engine in preparation for its ignition after stage separation. Picture perfect first stage flight so far. So about 30 seconds to go until stage separation. It's really clear here tonight, so we should be able to see that. And look at some of those purples in the contrail. Look at that. Look at that. There's stage shutdown. Separation. And there's the ignition of the second stage. Look at that. Look at stage firing that we are watching. about 100 kilometers up now, probably 250 kilometers. Look at that. Look at the contrail. Look at the contrail.
And on that left screen there, you
Look at that.
a bit dark on the east coast right now.
Look at that.
See those rifts deploy?
Rob, come here. There go the fairings. Look at that stage plume, guys. Look at that. Look at that. This is so awesome, guys. So awesome. I don't know if it's coming through on the mic, but you can also still hear the pulsing of the first stage in the atmosphere. Even though it shut down a minute ago, or more than a minute ago, you can still hear it here in Florida. Look at that. This is the second stage. This is the single Merlin vac engine on the second stage firing that we are tracking here. And the second stage is still on a nominal trajectory as it takes the 60 Starlink satellites into orbit. The first stage is about to do its entry burn. So the rapid sequence of events here will be that the first stage will do its entry burn, and then the first stage will be doing its landing burn right when the second stage cuts off as it enters orbit. So a very, very rapid sequence of events there. Of course, it's always wonderful to see the first stage come back and land, but our primary consideration is always the satellites on board the second stage as they continue on to orbit. So what we just heard over the net is that the first stage has reached its highest point in its arc and is now descending back down into the atmosphere. Oh my god, we can see the entry burn from here, but I don't want to take the camera off of the second stage, but we can see the entry burn happening. Let's see if I can get it. There's the entry burn. There, that was... Oh man, absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And there is the launch pad. Alright, stage 2 is still following its nominal trajectory. That is exactly what we want. Alright, so we're going to stand by now as we wait to hear stage 1's landing and the second stage delivering the payloads into orbit.
Stage 1, entry transonic.
Stage 1 is transonic, slowing down as planned.
Stage 1, landing burn, start up.
Stage 1 landing burn is started. All right. So here comes the first stage onto the drone ship. The second stage is in its final moments. Stage 2 is in terminal guidance. Almost about to cut
Stage
its
1,
engine
landing
off.
leg deployed.
Landing legs have deployed on the first stage. Stage 2 continuing onto orbit.
Stage 1, landing leg deployed. Falcon 9 has landed.
Landed. Haha! Landed. Fourth landing for this booster. It will be secured and brought back to Port Canaveral, waiting to hear on the second stage.
Stage 2 FTS is safe. Chico.
Stage 2 engine cutoff, standing by for that call of nominal orbit.
Below as expected. GNT confirms good insertion accuracy.
Good insertion into orbit. Second stage is in orbit and in a 32-minute coast. It will reignite at the 45-minute, 10-second mark for a very quick 2-second burn to circularize that orbit at 290 kilometers, and then the Starlinks will pop off about 16 minutes later.
Newfoundland acquisition of signal.
This was an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous launch from Cape Canaveral. I am amazed at how far we were able to follow the first stage just with the camera that we have here. Absolutely gorgeous and clear. Whew, awesome, awesome, awesome all around. From my part, I'm going to say thank you for joining us, and I'm going to kick it back over to our producer, Das. Here, I've got a few things to wrap up here at the press site here, but thank you all so much for joining us. The Starlinks are still on their way to orbit. They haven't separated yet, and they should separate an hour and 1 minute after liftoff, so that would be 10:20 Eastern, 3:20 UTC is the expected separation time for the Starlinks. Das, if you want to take it away, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you again for everyone for joining us.
Send that to live. All right. Mic check. Am I
Send
back?
that to
live. All right. Mic check. I am back, and y'all can actually hear me, which is fantastic. I am back, and y'all can. And I'm going to keep playing it back to you. Let's not listen to that. And I'm going to keep playing. Let's go ahead and stop that echo. I'm doing 4 streams again. I'm running Chris's stream from his camera. I'm doing a stream here to show you this stuff. I'm running the stream that goes from here to YouTube, and I'm running the stream from YouTube to there. I caught it though. I got the echo. It's a lot to juggle. I'm reading Twitch chat. I'm reading YouTube chat. I'm sending things over to Chris so that he can answer them in the field. It's a lot of stuff going on, but it's working quite well. Again, that was a SpaceX Starlink launch. That's version 1 of the Starlink satellites. Of course, Starlink is SpaceX's orbital internet. I'm going to call it orbital internet. It's satellite-based internet, and at some point they're saying they're going to start selling this to the public, so you can go out there and you can buy basically a pizza box receiver. Elon has said it's about the size of a pizza box, and you put this in your yard, or you put this on top of your car or something, and you get some satellite internet from these Starlink satellites. Now, that was 60 satellites they just launched on the top of that rocket. SpaceX has plans to launch a lot more of them. How many are going to be in the constellation? Thousands in the total constellation. I've heard like 5,000, 10,000. Who knows how many are actually going to get up there? But to get global coverage on these Starlink internet satellites, they are launching a lot of them. And look at this. It actually looks like that was the stack of satellites in the background. Maybe SpaceX is actually going to show us another view of that, but they're literally just stacked in the top of that fairing. They're using as much volume inside the fairing of the Falcon 9 as they possibly can. Just really quickly, that's the trajectory again there. But one more time, thank y'all so much for watching. It's like an orbital server rack. Nice. Or orbital server rack. Maybe I get a time for a couple more questions here. Did anybody see the launch? If you saw the launch, tell me in chat where you saw the launch from and what was going on. Where could you see it? Was it just a little dot in the sky? Could you see any sort of trail or plume behind it? Did anybody see maybe the landing burn? I bet you off the coast of North Carolina, South Carolina, certainly off the eastern coast of Florida, if you were looking out into the Atlantic Ocean, you would have seen Starlink, the rocket, going over. See people all over the place. There's no way I can read that fast. A lot of people saw it from West Palm. I see Orlando in there. Brett Red Trail from St. somewhere, missed the rest. Jupiter, Florida, St. Cloud, Apalooka. A lot of people in Florida. I saw Asheboro in there. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I'm in the studio here, so I didn't get a chance to go outside and see if I could see it. A lot of people all across Florida who could see that. And some people up from North Carolina. That's cool. There was Fort Pierce, Florida again, had a great view. Again, I'm going to say this real quick. I was attempting to bring something up on the stream, and this is something that we continue to work with, but I was trying to show y'all Flight Club, right? So Flight Club is a website. You go to flightclub.io, and this is made by one of the friends of NSF, Declan's his name, and it's this software that you can use to visualize the trajectories, right? It's web software. It's a website you go to. So if you're wondering whether or not, let me tell Chris that he's clear right quick. You're clear. Turn off camera. Sorry, I forgot to tell him that I had taken over. If you go to flightclub.io, you can actually put the trajectory wherever you want, and you can zoom around. And if you're over here, this is North Carolina. And if we were to zoom down and sort of look from North Carolina, Flight Club will actually show you both the actual launch trajectory, and this is the landing trajectory up here. Y'all see that? That's the burns from the rocket coming back down and landing on the drone ship off the coast. So that's flightclub.io. I was trying to bring that up a couple times as people were saying, like, oh, can we see it from here? Can we see it from here? Most of the time, Flight Club has these really great visualizations that you can see whether or not you'll be able to see it from your location. This also works for the Starlink satellites going over. So if you've seen on my YouTube channel, right, on my K-Space Academy YouTube channel, I've got a video of a Starlink pass that I caught from my backyard. So you can actually use Flight Club to see if you'll be able to see a Starlink pass going over your house, wherever you are. It has to be right after sundown or right before sunrise, so the satellites are lit up, but you're not lit up, and that sort of stuff. But again, I appreciate everybody hanging out with us this evening. I am Das. People call me DOS. My name is John Galloway, but I'm DOS, and I am running the stream here from my studio. I'm streaming this both on YouTube, which y'all are watching over here on YouTube, and on Twitch. I was actually doing some behind-the-scenes stuff. So if you wanted to see how I'm able to juggle 4 streams poorly sometimes when the audio echoes and stuff, but it's practice that makes perfect. You can find me over at twitch.tv/DasValdez, DasValdez. We'll put a link in chat over there. And we are going to go ahead and shut the NASA spaceflight stream. Again, we're still waiting for those satellites to be deployed. It's about an hour, I believe. The press release said it was an hour and 10 minutes before the satellites started to separate. So we'll shut it down before then instead of me just sitting here and talking constantly. We'll shut it down for now. But again, thank you so much. Hey, one more thing. We're able to do this because of y'all's support, whether you're on the YouTube channel or the Twitch channel. When you come to both the channels and you follow them, you subscribe to them, whatever it is you're doing, that is what makes us able to bring you these sorts of streams. And we don't always just use the official stream. We have our own cameras out there. I've got this, my P1000's in the other room. I've got this big honkin' 3-meter lens P1000, but we are trying to bring these streams to you as a different perspective, a different sort of commentary, a different way to cover stuff. So if you like it, there's things that you know how to find a YouTube channel again. There's buttons and bells you can ring, or I don't know. I'm not a YouTuber. You can follow channels or whatever in order to find stuff out. But we should be back for another live stream. In-flight abort coming up here. I believe I was seeing rumors about it going from the 11th to the 18th on Twitter. We should be back here for IFA, so be looking for us for that in-flight abort. And then in the meantime, to get your fix on space news, you can go to NASASpaceflight.com. There's articles, there's videos, there's all sorts of stuff. There's actually some behind-the-scenes information in a place called L2, like Level 2, that's a subscription-only area, but there's I don't know, you want to read the manual for the space shuttle that somebody uploaded? It's in L2. But all the photographers that have remote camera setups, they do the streak shots and stuff like that. They'll post things up on NASA Spaceflight. Also on Twitter. Twitter's a great place to find everybody, and we'll put some links in chat over here as well, so you can follow NASA Spaceflight. It's just at NASA Spaceflight on Twitter. Again, thanks for Chris G. Chris Gebhardt was over there. He's clear. He's asking me if he can shut off the solo. Shut it down. Let me tell Chris that he's allowed to shut everything down and pack up. We need one more person to tell him that stuff while I'm running my mouth. But again, you can keep up with all this at NASAspaceflight.com. Go to the website. Follow us on Twitter at NASAspaceflight. I'm at K-Space Academy. I play an awful lot of Kerbal Space programs. So if you want to learn about nonsense and shenanigans, you can find me over on my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/DasValdez. But again, we're shutting it down for now. And that was the successful launch so far. Still standing by for spacecraft separation. So far, everything looking good with the landing of the Falcon 9 on the drone ship. The satellites up there on that upper stage in the coast phase right now. And we will see you nerds later. Thanks for joining us. Now I gotta click buttons because I'm the guy that actually turns the scene off and stuff. Twitch, don't go anywhere. I'll keep talking to you. Okay. I mean, I'm still live over here. I don't know if they can hear me. I hope not. Oh, they can hear me. Bye, YouTube.